Welcome to This Explainer. I am so glad you're here because today we are diving into a really fascinating piece of ancient history. We're stepping back 2 millennia to look at one of the most famous and honestly most misunderstood events in the entire biblical narrative, the clearing of the temple. And we're going to do this by strictly looking at the historical evidence and textual sources. So, here is the core tension we're tackling today. We have this glaring, apparent contradiction staring us right in the face. On the one hand, the Mosaic Law explicitly permitted commerce in the sacred city for worshipers. It was allowed. But then you flip to the Gospels, and Jesus is violently overturning tables and condemning that exact same market. So what is going on here? Was he just rejecting the Torah, or is there something much deeper happening? Section 1. The apparent contradiction. All right, let's unpack this historical mystery. If you look at the Torah, specifically Deuteronomy chapters 12 and 14, the law actually provides a really brilliant mechanism for pilgrims. It basically says, hey, if the journey to Jerusalem is too long, worshipers can convert their tithes into money, travel light with just that currency, and then use it to buy sacrificial animals once they arrive. So it's a completely explicit legal provision for commerce. Yet in the Gospels, Jesus literally fashions a whip, flips the money changers' tables, and drives out the animal sellers. To make sense of this massive clash, we've got to look at the historical context. Section 2. A mercy for pilgrims. To understand this tension, we first need to grasp the original intent behind this law. It wasn't about building a massive commercial empire. It was originally designed as an act of profound compassion. To really grasp the scale of the Passover festival, we can look at the first-century historian Josephus. He actually recorded a census of the Passover lambs, requested by Cestius, the governor of Palestine at the time. And the count was a staggering 256,500 lambs. And since the law required a minimum of 10 people per lamb, you do the math, we're talking about close to 3 million pilgrims flooding into Jerusalem for just this one festival. I mean, just imagine the logistical nightmare of that. You've got millions of people traveling from all over the known world. And let's be real, absolutely nobody wants to drag a stubborn, bleeding ram over mountain passes and through the desert for hundreds of miles. It would have been miserable, not to mention incredibly dangerous. So this original law, it was a massive mercy. It was a highly practical, compassionate accommodation designed to make worship accessible and safe for distant travelers. Section 3. The systemic distortion. But as history so often shows us, even the absolute best laws can mutate into corrupt monopolies. By the 1st century, this convenient little mercy had turned into a completely extractive machine. Let's break down this currency exchange racket functioning inside the temple, because it is wild. Every Jewish male had to pay a yearly temple tax of a half shekel, which was roughly 6 pence. But here's the catch. You couldn't use standard Roman, Egyptian, or Syrian coins. Nope, the tax had to be paid in one specific currency, the Tyrian shekel. So when pilgrims showed up to exchange their foreign money, they got hit with a kolibos, a mandatory, non-negotiable exchange fee of 1 pence. And if their coin was larger than the tax, they got slapped with another 1 pence fee just to get their change. Now, to put that into perspective, a standard day's wage for a working man was only 3 pence. That means these fees alone could cost a poor pilgrim more than half a day's wages, and that's before they even paid the actual tax. Now check this out, because this is where the extortion gets really staggering, especially regarding the sacrifices themselves. Doves were specifically designated in Leviticus as the sacrifice for the poorest of the poor. Outside the temple, a pair of doves would run you about 3 pence. But the official temple inspectors had this highly convenient habit of finding blemishes on any animal bought outside. So pilgrims were essentially forced to buy from the official stalls inside the temple, where that exact same pair of doves was marked up to 75 pence. That is a state-sanctioned extortion directly targeting the most vulnerable worshipers. So you might be wondering, who is actually profiting from all this? Well, our historical sources point right to the family of Annas, the former high priest. These stalls were quite literally known as the bazaars of the sons of Annas. The religious elite had completely monopolized the sacrificial system, taking a mandatory religious duty and turning it into a massive exclusionary business empire. Section 4. The crime of location. But the corruption wasn't just economic. The spatial reality of this market was just as big of a violation as the extortion itself. To visualize this, it helps to know 2 Greek words used in the texts to describe the temple layout. First is the naos, which refers to the temple proper, the central inner sanctuary restricted only to the priests, but the entire 30-acre sacred precinct, including all those massive outer courts, was called the Hieron. And when we read about this historical incident, it's taking place out in the Hieron. Specifically, this huge chaotic market with the bleeding sheep, shouting money changers, and fierce haggling over prices was set up directly inside the court of the Gentiles. And this is absolutely crucial because this was the one and only outer court where non-Jewish worshippers were legally allowed to enter and pray. So, by dropping this massive commercial bazaar right there, the temple authorities effectively evicted the Gentiles from their designated place of worship. You literally couldn't pray or meditate in that deafening chaos. And this is exactly why Jesus quotes the prophet Isaiah, declaring, "My house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations." He wasn't just mad about the money. He was fiercely defending these marginalized Gentiles who were literally being crowded right out of their access to God. Section 5, the brigand's safe haven. Which brings us to the climactic theological verdict delivered against the temple authorities. Right after quoting Isaiah, Jesus follows up with a scathing indictment from the prophet Jeremiah, "But you have made it a den of thieves," or in a more direct translation, a brigand's cave. Now, to really feel the weight of this accusation, we need to rethink what a den actually signifies in prophetic literature. So here's the key point. A den of thieves is not where robbers commit their crimes. The crimes happen out on the road. The den is the safe haven. It's the cave in the rocks where the bandits retreat to hide and find shelter after they've committed their violence. By using this very specific prophetic metaphor, the accusation was that these religious elites were committing blatant economic extortion out in the open, and then using the sacredness of the temple as a religious shield, a safe haven, to hide behind and legitimize their systemic exploitation of the vulnerable. Section 6. Ideal versus first-century reality. Let's pull all this historical investigation together by comparing the original legal framework with the reality of the first century. When you see it laid out like this, the complete distortion of the system is just undeniable. We can clearly see the Mosaic ideal was rooted in compassionate travel accommodation, while the first century reality was an extractive commercial monopoly. Under the ideal, the poor were supposed to be protected and provided for. In reality, they were ruthlessly extorted through those crazy inspection markups on doves. The original intent welcomed the Gentiles to pray, but the reality saw their only sanctuary completely drowned out by the noise of a marketplace. We started this explainer looking at what seemed like a glaring contradiction between the Torah and the Gospels. But when you look at the real historical data, the extortionate exchange rates, the monopoly of anise, the literal eviction of the Gentiles, we are left with a much deeper question to ponder. By fashioning that whip and overturning those tables, was Jesus actually destroying the Mosaic law? Or was he fiercely defending its original compassion? It's a pretty powerful reminder that to truly grasp ancient texts, we have to look past the surface and understand the lived history behind them. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer today. I really hope this context helps bring these historical narratives to life for you.